Won a couple of Super Bowl championships. Long career with the Rams. Patriots, Eagles, too. 11 NFL seasons. And he was one of 6 father-son combos, each to win a Super Bowl. Chris Long and Howie Long. Love his dad. Talk to his dad. Dad sends me the nicest texts as he's sitting up there in either like Virginia or Montana watching the show. Our show, by the way, last 3 weeks has been from a radio studio. Yes, I need a haircut. I apologize. I'm a mess right now. I look like an overweight cat. I am that nobody takes care of. I'm a disaster. Chris Long is joining us. He's never a disaster. I never thought much about haircuts, Chris, and it's all I can think about now. How have you been holding up for the last 3 or 4 weeks in the middle of this American crisis, global crisis?
Oh man, I'm all right. I'm just really appreciative that there's people out there fighting this battle for everybody else who just has to sit at home. That's the biggest test of this generation, and I am passing it with flying colors.
By the way, do you have friends in healthcare and people that you connect with?
Yeah, I mean, like my team doctor back in St. Louis for the Rams, Dr. Voss. I talked to him a bit, and I know he's been on the COVID floor. And I just actually interviewed Myron Roll on my pod last night. If you remember Myron at Florida State.
Yes.
Yeah, he's in his 3rd year of residency to become a neurosurgeon, and with the nature of he's at Mass General, and the way things are, it's so overrun that people from different parts of the medical field have to rush to the fight, and he volunteered to be on the surge floor. So people like that, I can't think of enough, and it makes sitting at home seem a lot less tough than it did when some of these social isolation guidelines came down.
By the way, now Chris, how old are you right now today?
I am 35, and yeah, I just did, which is officially old, I think.
So you were, when was 9/11? You were 20. You were in your early 20s.
I was actually in high school. Yeah,
okay.
Which I could have been in my early 20s if I got held back a couple more years. But yeah.
So this is you've had the 2 big crises. One of them you're a teenager, and one of you're 35. Which one? And I'd like your perspective as a young person. The one that's changed for me here, Chris, is 9/11. We could still go to restaurants a week later. We've been forced to deal with these horror stories in an isolated state, which I think, from an emotional standpoint, is tougher. But in your life, tell me, compare a little bit 9/11 to now, and because you're a thinking person, how you've dealt with each and how your view of both.
Well, when I was in high school, I just didn't have the perspective that I have now as a 35-year-old man. Like, it was scary. It was terrifying. Your heart broke for New York City, for the folks that got lost in that tragedy. And, you thought about the first responders. I mean, we're thinking about the first responders now in a totally different sense as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, like, entire precincts have coronavirus, talking to some officers and firefighters, and they have to go on calls and all that stuff, and it's got to be terrifying, and the doctors as well. But I would just say this is tough because there's no timeline, and we're very used to in society having a timeline, and sports make us feel normal. You mentioned restaurants, sports. I can remember when 9/11 happened, games got canceled for a week. It was in high school football season for me, and we had the week where we shut everything down, but the next week we used sports as one of our vehicles as a society to come together and try to move forward. And you don't have that opportunity now. I'm not saying that sports is the first and foremost thing that matters in the midst of a tragedy for, like, the morale of the country, but it helps. And it was the right thing to shut everything down. It is a small cost to pay not to be able to turn on the TV and get that normal comforting feeling. Sharing an experience with everybody around the country, watching your favorite team, being able to, like, mindlessly turn on a Pac-12 game late at night or something. Like, we don't have that luxury.
Right.
I think whenever we get it back as sports fans, we'll be very appreciative, but it's hard. We are all, FaceTime, Zoom, all that stuff. We're having to find new ways to support each other, and that's what makes this unique and different.
Chris, you're a younger guy. You're very good on social media. You've got a podcast, Green Light with Chris Long. Again, you're a thoughtful, smart guy. And it's interesting because I've said sometimes Twitter, will try to trap you and marginalize you, that you can both simultaneously be empathetic for those struggling and also worry about pivoting to conversations about restarting the economy. You can have both those conversations. I worry about this, and this is why not only am I a sportscaster selfishly and want to see sports, but the poorest people in the country will suffer more. We know how the game works. The big companies won't suffer. They'll take small pay cuts. But poor Americans will take the brunt of this. And how do you reconcile, we've got death, we've got struggles, but the longer this economic, there's going to be some economic Darwinism here that's going to be ugly. We do need to have uncomfortable conversations about trickling the economy back. How do you, maybe starting the NFL camps in August and it's still not totally solved. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I mean, I'm no economist by any stretch of the imagination. I do know that, I'm worried more about the health and, the opportunity to live of my neighbors than I am the economic situation. I think there's a balance there for sure. I think, the poorest people, I'm consistently thinking about folks that right now don't have, food in their fridges, and they're worried about they were paycheck to paycheck before this. Isn't enough what's being done to get them back on their feet. I think about like small business owners and a number of friends in the restaurant industry. And, in town I live, there's a ton of great restaurants, and that's a big part of the economy.
Yeah.
And like iconic restaurants just go under pretty quick.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I think that this is an all hands on deck situation, and whenever it starts again, and you got to find creative ways to support the businesses that you care about, the small business owners.
Yep.
And there's a ton of athletes jumping in the fray to help out with the most marginalized populations in the United States. So I think that's a positive. We're going to find out, that sports, as we already knew, but even to a greater degree, can be a great help to people, not just from a morale standpoint, but these athletes can galvanize people to help out. When you see athletes beating owners to helping out, workers at arenas or their communities, I think that's not necessarily a slight on the owners. You always want them to act faster and anybody with a ton of money, but the athletes are in the forefront. So I think that's a good thing. And whenever it ends, and I think you can be optimistic about, hey, we hope we have football season. Colin, I don't know that we have football season. And if we don't, it's totally secondary to this entire issue. But, you saw the Gundy comments, the Dabo comments, and people were kind of up in arms. I don't think the issue is being optimistic. I think it's how you respect this process, because this process doesn't care about football. And, asking for players to get back on campus or, waxing philosophical about how it's that we got to overcome and we have to have a football season, like that's not sensitive to this process, which we're in the back seat on this thing. We're not driving, and we're not used to that.
Chris Long joining us. Yeah, it's and I'll say something here. I could be totally wrong because I only played high school football, but I tend to believe that there's too much hitting for young kids playing football. I don't think we need all the OTAs. I do think there are units like the offensive line that need a certain chemistry, need more practice. But I think football is just as fascinating and fun without the escalated violence. I don't think there needs to be a lot of hitting during the season. And I think more protective gear and protecting players is paramount. Other people in football are like, listen, we got to hit. We need a month of hitting. We got to start camps. And I think, you know what? College football doesn't have 4 preseason games. And I watched Auburn and Oregon last year in week 1. Looked pretty damn good to me. looked like good football from a bunch of 19-year-old kids. So if you did miss the OTAs and you did miss preseason, I think you're fine. Maybe sloppy tackling, but where do you fall on the, oh my gosh, we have to have so much hitting before season starts?
Well, I'm a player, so when you usually hear noise about we need to hit for a month, it's usually ironically not from players, or it's from players who are retired and spiteful about the fact that these younger players are not having to hit as much. And my dad could certainly be included in that conversation, but he understands, having a son playing throughout my career. And I went through that first CBA or the first CBA in my career about a decade ago. And we were supposed to have the Hall of Fame game that year. So we were supposed to have 5 preseason games. And I was like, come on, man, give me a break.
Right.
I don't need it. I need to be healthy, that sort of thing. The CBA or the lockout happens. We barely have camp. We missed that 5th preseason game. And I didn't notice a big difference. I know there'll be people that tell you that execution is big, and a defensive end might not be the one to talk to because, as we're going to, I'm sure, talk about, there's an unprecedented amount of quarterback movement this year. So, I think it's disrupted the draft process. It's going to disrupt the timing and rhythm of different offenses and installations of new systems. I think you'll see the cream rising to the top as far as teams that have a lot of continuity, both from a scheme perspective and players. It's going to be real challenging in some places. I mean, this was the toughest year for Brady to make that switch.
Yep.
And I don't think he could have anticipated that. Now, for a defensive end, I don't care about the hitting and the contact, but I'm sure if you're on offense and you're running, you're orchestrating something where it's a lot more, necessary to have practice. I wonder how that's going to pan out for some teams.
That's a great point. Chris Long joining us. You played a year with Brady. Shocked he went to Tampa?
I'm not shocked he went to Tampa. And you can't be shocked that it's unceremonious. I mean, but if you'd have told me a year ago that it'd be Tampa, or 2-3 years ago it'd be Tampa, and it would be, a relative blip on the radar screen. There's no decision. There's no LeBron decision. There's no big build-up. Tom plays everything close to the vest, and that's very Tom. And you knew it'd be kind of a covert ops thing where nobody knew the motivations. I mean, you talked to his friends, and they didn't know. I mean, I don't think Julian Edelman knew. You liken this thing to a divorce. Jules is like the kid. Jules didn't even know where Tom was going. So that tells you something. But I think, it being so unceremonious is the part that it's a reality right now. But we saw more of Fauci that week than we did Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And I just never would have imagined that. And that's part of the circumstance and the reality that it would have gone like that. I knew Brady would play it close to the vest whenever he hit free agency, but to be so unceremonious was a bit shocking. Tampa Bay, from a football perspective, it was his best option.
Oh, God, I love their players. I said this. I covered them for 2 years, Chris. They've had great coaches. I mean, Tony Dungy was a great coach. Sam Weiss was innovative. John Gruden can coach. Bruce Arians can coach. They've had Hall of Fame players. They've won a Super Bowl. They can't get the quarterback position right. Seriously, they're the only franchise in league history that doesn't have an all-time great quarterback. I think Tom solves a lot of their stuff. I like their players. Chris, I like their players a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Me too. I do. And I've said this before. I think out of the three decisions that it came down to, the possible decisions with Tom, it was L.A. and the Chargers. It was, New England, obviously, there to the end, presumably, on some level. And it was Tampa, and I think Tampa gave him the best opportunity to win from a football standpoint. I thought some people were like, I think this kind of reinforces, Tom loves his brand. Okay, the only thing he let us, astray on during the whole free agency process was the Hulu commercial, and that was part of that's branding. That's part of the whole, like, let's see how magnificent my brand can be. And it's amazing that he could stop the world effectively the week of the Super Bowl because of, a 30-second ad. And it's like, players have walked off the field and they're making their own news. I think that, some people thought L.A. because they were like, yeah, no, Tom's a brand, as evidenced with all this stuff. And he's not going to want to play in Tampa or Tennessee. This goes to show you that Tom is still about winning first and foremost.
Yes.
It's Tampa, but this is a football fit. And I don't think if you nothing against the city of Tampa, if Tom and Giselle wanted to live somewhere in their power rankings of possible destinations for their family, I don't think Tampa's high. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they like that whole vibe down there, and the Jeter house is going to work great. But I wouldn't have put it high on the list.
Yeah.
So I think this was strictly a football move. You got the tight end, you've got the 1,000-yard receivers, you got a top 5 defense that's going to be better because they're not going to be in a sudden change situation all the time with Jameis throwing picks. I've been on defenses where we turn the ball over a lot. It's not fun. It's a great situation for him.
By the way, that Jeter house, I'm not an envy guy or jealousy guy. I don't like huge houses because I don't like to yell for people. The bigger house you're in, the more you're yelling at your kids. And not like mean yelling, but yelling. I looked at that house and I'm like, it didn't do it for me. I know that sounds right. It looks like a ski lodge.
I'm not a big house guy. Like, yeah, I have a big house relative to what I used to never want to live in a big house when I grew up. But, you know, yeah, you'd be hard pressed to sell me on a 30,000 square foot house. Let me just institutional control has to be pretty hard with kids in it. Although Phillip Rivers could have used a house like that. There's not as many in Indy.
Yeah, I just saw Drake's, by the way. You can go online and look at Drake's house. It's architecturally, it's one of the most amazing structures in America that I've ever seen. But good God, I mean, the only good thing when you're like 9 years old, you'd play a mean game of hide and seek. But Drake's house, folks, go online and watch it. Drake's house, I'll say this, the guy's got unbelievable taste. It is one of the architectural gems I've ever seen somebody in the world live in. All right, Chris Long, you got a podcast. Hold on. Green Light with Chris Long. You're also friends with Russillo, who I really like, and we give each other crap. But he speaks highly of you, too. Anything else you need? You want to promote anything?
No. Just my podcast, I guess. I mean, this is a time where people need content. I know it's there's a lot more important things going on. But, pop on in. Greenlight Pod.
Good talking to you, Chris.
Good talking to you, too, man.
Smart guy. Chris Long. Smart guy. Curious guy. Like Howie. Howie's bright. Howie's really bright. Defensive linemen. They're thinkers, too. How about that? Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Cliff Kingsbury is not too worried about how the virtual setup will affect the Cardinals draft this year. He actually thinks it could have a positive influence on the draft process.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll still overthink it. I mean, we always tend to do that, but it may streamline it a little bit where it's more of an efficient process, and you go with what you see on tape. Luckily, we were able to have the combine and get to be around some of those guys, some of your top guys, but it could very well kind of eliminate some of that clutter and have us go with our first instinct more.
I like this mentality. As you know, we are all dealing with a very unique set of circumstances. This is unprecedented, but we are all in the same situation.
Yes.
So you can look at it one way or another, and some days are worse than others, as we know. But he does have a point. Sometimes with these things, you have too much information, and you start to lean on something that you like a little bit more that you found out, rather than going with what you should be paying attention to, which is the overwhelming amount of tape that you have on a guy.
Yeah.
Like you said with Mitch Trubisky, maybe you went to his pro day and you fell in love with him, or you had this interview and he said something that reminded you of your childhood, and now all of a sudden you're in love with him instead of paying attention to what he was doing on the field. I am not a scout, and I've never had to make a draft pick in the NFL in my life, but I do think that sometimes you run into paralysis by analysis, and that is his overall point. Maybe you're going to go a little more instinctively in this draft because you aren't going to have the pro day and the in-person visits and the doctor physicals and everything else that you would normally have to examine and overthink it.
The medical thing. You know, so I went online today, Joy, and Greg Gabriel is was an NFL scout guy forever. I follow him on Twitter. He knows a lot about the NFL. He's now in the XFL. He pointed out this morning on Twitter, he said the XFL had a virtual draft. No problem. So actually the XFL did this, probably because they lacked the resources to do an NFL draft like everybody else and couldn't.
Right.
And he said there were no hitches. So this has been done. It's just, it's not protocol as usual for the NFL, but the XFL did a virtual draft. They had no problems with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be on a larger scale, and I think the NFL guys would argue that the implications of their picks have greater ripple effects.
Right.
You know, even throughout the economy of the cities that they represent. But that is actually a good thing, though. So maybe the XFL can pass on a little bit of the information of how they ran it so efficiently to the NFL. But again, how you look at it is going to determine at least what your level of anxiety going into draft day will be. And these guys know overall who they want to pick, whether it's a regular draft or a virtual one. You've done your prep and work. So it's not like they're in the draft room like, I don't know, spin the wheel, we'll land on somebody.
By the way, Joy, I don't have a screen here. I can see you, but I can't see what we look like on TV. My boss, Chris Healy, just sent a picture of what we look like. So you look fantastic.
Thank you.
I would like to again apologize for my hair.
Colin, your hair, again, you are looking at this the wrong way. Everyone thinks that you wear a toupee or a wig or some kind of hairpiece thing.
Yeah.
Now everybody knows that's really your hair. And there's a lot of people that would trade having your hair for their current, situation. So
all right.
I think it's a blessing.
I'm getting
a
lot of vanity here. I'm getting very vain and insecure.
No, it's fair. You are on television every day, and this is not your normal hairstyle. I totally understand. I'm telling you, I think you look great, and it's a blessing that you have all that hair.
All right.
So Emmanuel Sanders had his best season back in 2014 when he was catching passes from Peyton Manning,
yes.
and he's ready to get back to that style of offense in New Orleans this year. He said, "I'm excited to be there in a pass-happy offense. That means everything. These are the types of offenses where you can really showcase your talent." He hasn't had over 1,000 yards receiving since the 2016 season. So I actually think that the Saints are in the best position in the NFC South. I mean, obviously, the addition of Brady is significant, and we're all looking forward to seeing what he does there. But again, you have to take into consideration everything that's going on right now. Now, Brady's obviously reached out to a lot of guys on the team. I don't know if he's talked to everyone, but he did ask for their numbers, and I do know that he's reached out to his teammates. But being in person with them and also being able to work with them and train with them, like the Saints are lockstep with everything, and they're bringing back a lot of their stars and obviously adding new ones.
That division, again, Breeze, Brady, Bridgewater, and Matt Ryan. Find me in the history of the NFL 4 veteran quarterbacks, all with winning records in the same division. I do not believe it's ever happened. For not an extended period, it is the best quarterback division in all the years I've been doing sports talk radio. Brady, Breeze, Matt Ryan, Bridgewater. Your
certainly
fourth
a lot of offense.
Your fourth best quarterback's Teddy Bridgewater, who's double digits over 500. That's your fourth best quarterback in the division. I mean, every division's got a quarterback that a franchise doesn't want. Every one of those franchises wants and loves their quarterback.
That's a challenge to the stat guys out there, because we asked about that yesterday. Speaking of Matt Ryan, finally, the Falcons are the latest team to reveal their new uniforms for next season. Apparently, this is redesign season as well. The team said that the goal was to blend the Falcons' classic style with the modern progression of Atlanta. The new look is part of a comprehensive rebrand for the first time for the team in 17 years.
Wow.
You have seen them.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Don't pop for me. A lot of rebranding by teams. But to be fair, everybody crushed the Rams' new unis or helmet, and I thought it was pretty cool. I don't think it's a whiff. I like Tampa's redesign, which is basically old school, bringing back Tampa's looks like the Tampa that won the Super Bowl, so I like Tampa's. It's fine. I mean, again, I think generationally, I like old school more, and so I think you would like these unis more than me, I would guess. I
don't really love them. I mean, they're not dramatically different. I feel they're kind of similar to Tampa in that they went kind of basic, but I don't know if I love the ATL up top. And the Panthers, the Carolina Panthers, have already begun the Twitter war with them, so they I was literally thinking they look like movie uniforms, like a football movie uniform, because they're so basic. And they compared them to the Mean Machine uniforms from the Adam Sandler version of The Longest Yard.
Yeah.
It's not terribly off. So it's pretty good roast by the Panthers. But look, we'll get used to them like we always do with uniform changes. Who knew all this rebranding was going on, by the way?
It's funny. When the Rams came out, somebody did say the Rams' new logo looked like a movie about pro football where you weren't allowed to use the real logo, so you'd have a movie logo. And I was like, or it looked like a laundry detergent brand logo, the Rams. So I thought it was okay, but Atlanta's a little blocky, a little hip. I don't know. Doesn't do much for me.
We'll get used to them.
Yeah, Joy with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
All right, Tom Brady, 2-hour interview with Howard Stern. Coming up next, Joy will help me. Best for last, Tom or false? I didn't get to hear the whole interview. Did he say it or did he not say it? That's coming up. The Herd.